Hello everyone and welcome to Jim's Code Corner. My name is Jim Belcher and this is episode 2 in our series of creating a full stack application with Spring Boot and Angular 4. Last time we got Spring Boot set up with our MySQL database. This time the plan is to get Angular 4 set up and be able to create a build that we can distribute and basically see something on the screen finally. So let's go ahead and get started. First, there's one thing I forgot to mention last episode, which I want to mention now so I don't forget, is that at the end of each episode, I'm going to go ahead and push up my code into a Git repo, which I'll put the URL into the description of this video. And if you go in and look at the tags I create, I'll tag each episode. So if you just want to start where that episode ended, go ahead, pull down that tag, and you'll be all set to go. Okay, so moving on. To get started today, first thing we're going to do is we're going to create our Angular app within our repository. We're going to do that using the Angular CLI. So if you're not familiar with Angular CLI, it's basically a command line tool that you can use to make Angular 4 applications. You can find it at the cli.angular.io website. I'll put a link to that in the description once again. And we're going to use that and get going. So I'm going to go to my command line tool here. Go back to my path. Alright, so as we can see, I am in my directory for my application here. So I'm going to go ahead and use the Angular CLI tool to create the application. So it'll be ng new, and I'm just going to call the application web, just because it's the web portion of the application. And it does take a minute. So as you can see, it's creating all kinds of files for us. It's going to get everything set up. It's going to set up Karma, so we can do our unit testing. All that will be there and working right out of the box. Similar to how Spring worked right out of the box, Angular 4 works right out of the box. So let's give that a moment while that sets up for us. I guess while that's oh, not done. Never mind. Okay, so if we want to see what the application looks like right out of the box, all we have to do is do ng serve. Excuse me, I have to actually be in the web application for that. ng serve. So that'll give it a moment, and it'll actually it's going to turn those TypeScript files into some JavaScript, compile that using Webpack, and make us a website. And I'll go ahead and serve that on port 4200 for us as well. So going back to the browser, we can see localhost 4200 and app works. Simply right out of the box, it just works. So I'm going to go ahead and put this into my Visual Studio Code editor. It's my preferred IDE for front-end applications. So give you a little brief view of the file structure here. At the root, you can see basically a lot of setup files. You got the package.json, your karma conf, and then it comes with this Angular CLI JSON, which we're going to manipulate here in a second. It also comes with this protractor conf for, once again, that's your end-to-end testing. So all this works right out of the box. It even has examples of how to do some of these things here. So it's your end-to-end testing. If I go into the source code, you're going to find, let's go into app here. And you'll see it comes right out of the box with some spec files. So it comes with unit tests already set up. And whenever we build a new component using the CLI tool, all this will just work. We'll have a spec file, we'll have a component file, we'll have a HTML file, and they just work. And that's the beauty of Angular 4, especially using Angular CLI. It's really great. So let's get these two tools working together. I'll go ahead and close these out. So the first thing we're going to do is I want to set up a proxy because during development, I want to talk to APIs. I can't have both the backend and the front end working on the same port on my one machine, not without doing some really tricky stuff. So we'll just run a proxy, and it makes life a lot easier. So in order to do that, I'm just going to create a file here. I want to call that file proxy.conf.json. And let's get the JSON file, obviously, as you can see here. So what I want to do is I always do my API. I'm going to put a proxy to the API, And I always put a version on my APIs, so I'm just going to do version 1 there. And that's going to be an object. It's going to have 2 properties. The first one being target. http://localhost host colon 8080, which is what, if you remember correctly, that was what Spring Boot runs on. So basically what we're telling is the proxy, any API calls that start with API version 1, go ahead and proxy that over to port 8080 for me. And just for now, just for development purposes, we'll do secure false. And we'll save that guy. And now we have a proxy, and we could do that from we could run a ng-serve now running with that proxy. And I'll actually show you that real quick, see what that looks like. So let's go ahead and kill that, because that was my test. Or that was the website. So what we can do is just ng-serve now. We could do ng-serve -- proxy config. And I can put proxy.conf.json. And what we should get is pretty much the exact same thing we just saw a moment ago. The only difference is any calls that go to port 80, that go to that endpoint, that API/version 1, will now go to localhost port 8080 instead. So you can see it still works, and that's fine. I don't like typing all that though when I'm actually coding. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the editor, and we're going to modify the package.json here. And as you can see from the package.json, it gives us several tools here, or commands we can run. And here's that ng-serve, so we can just do npm run start if we want to, builds, test, end-to-end testing, linting. We could do all those things. What I like to do is I like to modify the start command to run that proxy. So I typically don't run ng-serve. I usually run npm run start. And that way that proxy is just set up for me. And it makes development just a little bit quicker for me. So I'm just going to make that proxy.conf.json. And we're just going to save that guy off. There. Now, whenever I run npm run start, it'll run that proxy. And we can demonstrate that here. npm run start. And you can see it's running with that proxy. And it's just going to build the same thing we saw a moment ago. Just makes development just that much quicker. Voila. Okay. So now that's working. The next part of getting Angular set up is I'm going to get that embedded in the build with Spring Boot. And what that's going to do is going to give us one jar file that we just have to put onto a server, run the jar file, and boom, our application's up and running, just like that. Right now, in its current setup, we can have them both running. We have to do all kinds of little tricks on the server to make things run properly. I want to skip that step, or you can have multiple servers, excuse me. But I like to skip that step, especially in a small application, and just have it run with one jar, run within the jar file. So what we are going to do is the first step is going to be to go to this Angular JSON or Angular CLI JSON file. And we can see if we do an ng build right now, the output directory is just going to go to dis. What I want to do is I want to embed that within the Spring Boot application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually modify this to be source main resources static, which is the file path that Spring Boot uses for its static files. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to build the application and put the output of that build into the static folder. That way Spring Boot just recognizes it as a static file and just runs it, and as it would any web page. And we can actually test this really easily by just doing ng build. Okay, we can see it's now built. So now if I go back to STS and I go to static, we're going to see all kinds of files in there that I just built. Sorry about that. I had a knock at the door. Uh, anyway, so we saw that the files were created. So if we run Gradle boot run and we build our, oh, sorry, wrong folder. Gradle boot run. We'll build our web application. Those files should be in the static folder where we saw them, and we should be served the same thing we saw when we built Angular. So what we'll do is we're here, once again, 8080, and bang, app works. So we're seeing the code, it's working there in with Spring Boot, awesome. The one last thing I prefer to do in these type of applications is to be able to run one single command and have the whole application build into one jar file. I don't like having to build Angular and then turn around and build the backend, like what I just did. So what I did, and I'll show us, you already typed it up, just because this could be pretty confusing at times. Go ahead and close this one out. Is I actually put it right in the build.gradle file. So what I did, starting off here in the build script, is I had to add a new repository, Json. I added this class path for a dependency for Node. I actually applied a Node plugin. Then I put these items in here, which basically sets up Node, sets up npm, tells it if you are not if I don't have Node there, install it, and download it and install it. I changed the working directory to be web, and I tell it where the Node modules directory will be, which will also be in web. The next thing I do is, if I scroll down here, is I created this task, the run ng build. So basically, it's just going to run the same thing I ran in the command line, ng build. And I have this here as a property, so I can still run Gradle boot run, but if I do Gradle boot run with the property with ng build, it's going to make sure Node and npm are installed, and then it's going to run that ng build, which is going to build the application and put it into that static file or folder. So to prove that, let's go ahead and delete this static folder. Let's go ahead and delete it. Yep, we can go. And go back to the command line and kill that. Let's clear this out so we can see what's going on here. Make sure I'm in the right directory. I am. So if we do Gradle boot run dash capital P and then ng build, we should go ahead and build the front end and the back end and put the files from the front end into the back end. So we can see it there is doing the ng build for us. Now it would have did npm install if I had not had Node installed already. And you can see there, that's what I built the front end, and now it's building the back end. And there we go, it's serving. So if I go to here and I hit localhost, once again, same result, there's the application running in the back end. So there we have it. We have the back-end Spring Boot application running. We have the Angular 4 application running for the front end. We have them working together. So that task is now complete. So next episode, we'll start getting our hands dirty and really start coding things. So thank you guys very much for watching. Hit that like button, leave your comments, suggestions. Remember, this is your channel. I want to do whatever makes you, give you what you need to make better developers out of yourselves. So let me know, and thank you.